right, everyone. Hello, and welcome. All right, let me get to my phone so I can see. What is this? Right. Your guys' comments. So, my channel. There's my video. Alright, so just waiting for the chat to load in. Come on. It's not going to load. Okay, let's try that again. There we go. Alright, hello everyone. Hello Wild Smiley. Hello Moonzer. Hello Max, Mark, Ozzy, Mark Hooper. Who else do we got? We got Ryan. Hello everyone. So, good to see you all again. I was going to do a tea time last Saturday, but there was a lot going on this past week. A lot going on. I could not do a live stream last weekend. So, but I'm here now, and feeling quite well. Let's see. Hello, King of Battleships. Alright, folks, we got quite a live stream for you guys today, and I hope you guys enjoy it. Let me see here. What was I? Oh, right, I need to brew the tea. Okay, so let's go ahead and dump some of this out. Hey, Tim, how's it going? Alright, gotta dump half of this out. That's good. And then half of this. There we go. Lachlan says, "Hi Alex, haven't been on in months due to school, but earlier than expected at 6 a.m. in Sydney, Australia. Sunday is just starting to rise, and the cockatoos and kookaburras are singing." Oh, nice. I love kookaburras. Alright. Awesome, Moonzer. Okay, so let's continue with this tea. And we're just going to pre-warm the teapot and the teacup. Let that acclimate. So I usually ask people what tea I should do for the live stream. I do that about 10 minutes before the live stream. Only one person responded. They had said Lady Grey, but because no one else had responded and because Earl Grey was right there in front of me, I just grabbed Earl Grey instead. So we're doing Earl Grey today. Plus, I had already poured the milk, so I don't usually have milk with Lady Grey tea because it's just, the flavor just disappears. But, yeah, so, Ozzy, how's it going? Yeah, so the weather here today is perfect for afternoon tea because it is cold and rainy outside. And as you guys know, I live up near Portland, Oregon, here in the Pacific Northwest. It's almost always cold and rainy. I love that kind of weather. That's one of the biggest reasons why I moved up here, was this beautiful weather and all the greenery. I couldn't do these tea times if I had still lived in Southern California like I did years ago, because it was always too warm to drink anything hot. You know, I mean, unless it was like the middle of winter and the temperature came down to maybe 60 degrees Fahrenheit outside, and that was like cold for us. So, you know, it just was always too warm to drink like hot tea. So, but living up here, it's nice and cold. I don't know the temperature today, but it feels nice, and I can dress in layers and stuff. Like I like to dress in layers. I don't like to dress in like shorts and a t-shirt. I will if it's a warm day, but but I prefer to dress in layers. I like to dress up. Mark says, it's cold and rainy here in sunny Queensland too. Oh, wow. That's pretty cool that we have the same weather. Hello, Sarah. I'm glad to finally be able to catch the stream live. Awesome. Glad you're here. Kat says, I have the same teapot, but I'm afraid to crack it, so it just sits there on the shelves for looks. You know, that is a very legitimate concern to have. But in the description of each and every one of my tea time videos is how to care for your bone china. So what I do to prevent it from cracking is first I fill it with the hottest tap water that my sink can produce. And then I let that acclimate, let it get warm. And then I empty out half of it before I'm about to brew tea. And then I empty out half of the tap water, refill the rest or top it off with boiling water to raise the temperature even more. And then, as I'm about to do right now, is when I dump all of it out after it's kind of sit for a little while. See, the teapot is so hot I can't even touch it right now. And then I dump the whole thing out. And then I get the boiling water, put that right in there. And because we took the time to bring up the temperature slowly of the teapot, there's no thermal shock. It won't crack. And then we can put the tea in. It's 111 right now. I like the Earl Grey to brew for about 4 minutes. About 115 is when I'll take that out. But yeah, if you gradually bring up the temperature, starting with hot tap water first, and then emptying a little bit away and introducing boiling water and just slowly bringing up the temperature in those two different stages, then that'll help a lot. And then this teacup has half tap water, half boiling water, so it's pretty hot right now. And I'll just let that sit there. It's still steaming. And that's how you can prevent your china from cracking. Let's see here. Wild Smiley says, I actually never have milk with Earl Grey tea. For me, it kind of smothers the bergamot flavor. I would agree. Milk does smother the bergamot flavor. I use oat milk because I'm lactose intolerant. And oat milk has something about it that it preserves flavor more. Like, for instance, I make pancakes on weekends for me and my dad. And the recipe calls for either buttermilk or whole milk. If you don't have buttermilk, it tells you to use whole milk. I never have buttermilk, and I don't drink whole milk because I'm lactose intolerant, so I use oat milk. And believe it or not, the pancakes taste better than if I were to use whole milk. Buttermilk is still the best, but the pancakes taste better than if I were to use whole milk. And I think the reason why is because the other flavors in the pancake are allowed to come through, whereas like milk itself will dull the flavor. So anyway, I guess what I'm trying to say is oat milk will kind of mute the flavors a little bit in the tea, but not as badly as regular milk. And I have had Earl Grey without milk before. I prefer to have it with like a very thin slice of lemon. Only thing is, I almost never keep lemons in the house. So if I'm not going to have it with lemon, then I'm going to put cream or milk in there, oat milk in there. So yeah, that's why. But I think if I had a slice of lemon, I'd probably just have it as the tea, some sugar, slice of lemon. So yeah. 1:13, so we got 2 more minutes on that tea. Spencer says, oh my god, I live in Gresham. Welcome to the Pacific Northwest. Thank you very much. Yeah, I moved up here back in 2020 at the start of the pandemic. So I've been here for 4 years now, and I love it. I love it. I grew up in Southern California. I hated it. I'm sorry. I know a lot of folks currently, who watch my channel currently live in Southern California. They love it. They love being near Disneyland. They love being near the Queen Mary. They love being near all kinds of stuff, and that's cool, but I just never liked it. I mean, I like the Queen Mary. I like, or used to like, Disneyland. You know, but what I didn't like was the weather, and I didn't like all the concrete. Concrete and asphalt everywhere. I mean, you know, it's funny because if you look at aerial images of Southern California, it looks like there's a lot of trees, but there really isn't. When you're driving around, it's nothing but just concrete jungle as far as the eye can see. And it gets hot. All that concrete heats up in the day and then radiates that heat at night. And it's dry. The weather's always dry. I always had skin problems when I lived in Southern California. I always had issues of dry skin. And if you wanted to see a forest, you know, to go hiking or something, you had to drive a long, long way to like Big Bear or something. And, you know, and even then those forests are dry. Yeah, it's just, yeah. Anyway, my point is, when I moved up here, it was just wonderful. It was just wonderful. I mean, it's everything I've ever dreamed of. All these, I look out my window, and I have a view of the surrounding hills, all forested looking. I say looking because I know that there's houses on those hills, but you can't see the houses through the trees, so it just looks like, you know, hills full of forests. And then in a slightly further distance, there are forests. There are patches where there's no houses, and it's all just huge areas, acreages of wild trees and stuff. And not even a 4-minute walk from my apartment is a greenway where I can just exercise. I can just walk for, I think it's a 2-mile long greenway, and it's just a walkway through the trees. And what's really great is on a day like today when it's raining, oh, it is so peaceful. Because there's a river right there, and you can like look at the river, and you can see all these beautiful trees dripping with the rain. And if it's a foggy morning, because we get a lot of foggy mornings, it's just, oh man. When I first moved up here, I got an Uber ride to the DMV, Department of Motor Vehicles. For those of you who are not from the United States. I got a ride to and from the DMV, and the guy who was driving me, he was like, oh yeah, you'll love it here. This is God's country. And it's funny because immediately I understood exactly what he meant. When you look at the landscape around here, even though there's a lot of city and suburbs around, it doesn't look like it because there's so much nature still here. And it's beautiful. It's just breathtaking scenery. And if I go down to the street where my apartment complex, you know, comes off of, if I look down that street, I get a view of Mount Hood, the nearby volcano. So, the one that'll probably destroy me someday. But, yeah, and if you go to certain places in the city, you get a view of Mount Hood, Mount St. Helens, and what is it? Not Mount Adams, is it? Yeah, Mount Adams? Pretty sure. I can't remember the third one. Yeah. Pretty sure it's Mount Adams. But yeah, I just love it up here. Just absolutely love it. I definitely oversteeped my tea. Let's see here. Yeah, I definitely overdid it. Normally, when I grab the infuser, I give it like a stir. But I'm going to try not to stir it too much because then it'll definitely taste strong. I think that's good. Okay. Here I got all talking about Oregon, and now my tea's oversteeped. Okay, so let's go ahead and empty this teacup. You know, I'll just put more milk than usual just so it doesn't taste so strong. Alright. There we go. And then I usually like 1.5. And then the oat milk. That's definitely more than I usually put. Hopefully it doesn't taste too strong. Alright. Let's give it a bash. Pretty good. Pretty good. Yeah, so, okay, even though I oversteeped the tea, it doesn't taste that bad. So that's good. Alright. Let me read some comments here. Oh, I guess I should get into what I was hoping to talk about during this live stream. So, first thing is why I was missing during the last Saturday. Second thing I wanted to talk about was a brief Queen Mary update. And then I wanted to talk, maybe we'll talk a little bit about Disneyland afterwards. So those are the three topics today. Let me just read some of people's comments here. I don't read them all out loud. I kind of go through them, and if there's something that I think I could respond to, then I will. Okay. Oh, hey, Shiloh. How's it going? Oh, Shiloh, you're on the Queen Mary right now. Oh, wow. That's pretty cool. Oh, and Steve is too. So Steve, Shiloh, Martina, Milad, all on the Queen Mary. Awesome. Hey, Top Impressive Line. Oh, Kiwaten is opening next week. Oh, nice. Okay, so let me get caught up on this here. Moonzer says, do you think the 1965 RMS Queen Elizabeth refit was worth it? So for those wondering, the RMS Queen Elizabeth had a refit in 1965, just a couple of years before it retired. And that refit did a lot of upgrades and stuff, but one of the major changes was the addition of a Lido deck on the stern area of the ship. So it had an outdoor swimming pool, and that was supposed to help the ship, gain more passengers as a cruise ship. So they were going to use it for cruising. And of course, if you're going to go cruising in nice warm weather, you need an outdoor pool. So they added one on the Queen Elizabeth for that purpose. Because transatlantic travel was no longer... transatlantic travel by ship was no longer popular. So, do I think it was worth it? I don't think there's a positive or a negative answer for me on that part. It did what they needed it to do. It did help boost passenger numbers for its cruises. So it helped to keep the ship out on the water a little bit longer than Queen Mary. So it did what it needed. So, I mean, in that sense, yes. But it did heavily alter the ship. But I mean... Can you really say that an alteration during a ship's career is an alteration of history? Not really, because it's still making history since it's out on the ocean still. It'd be different if, like, they suddenly added a swimming pool on Queen Mary. Then I would say, okay, now you're altering a historic ship. But, back then, 1965... QE was still in service. So, excuse me. I think it's fine. Ultimately I think it's fine. Ryan and Mark say that they got to visit Oregon. Yeah, Oregon is beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. And there's lots of great places to see. But they're all very far apart from each other. So you better be ready for, like, some driving. But other than that, like, you're surrounded by forests all the time. But the attractions within those areas are far apart. So, like, you got Cannon Beach, which is this beautiful coastal city and beach along the coast, obviously, because it's a beach. And it's got this huge 200-foot tall rock called Haystack Rock. And it's beautiful. It's where they filmed the Goonies. In fact, I did a video of just me walking down the beach. And it's called, like, this is the biggest beach I've ever seen, or something like that. Because it was the biggest beach I've ever seen. Yeah, so there's that, and it's a beautiful landscape. And then you've got things like, you know, Mount Hood, where you could go skiing and stuff. But Mount Hood is like 4 hours or something from Cannon Beach, you know. And then 3 hours from Mount Hood is the beautiful Columbia River Gorge, where, you know, they have, I mean, I think most people have heard of the Columbia River Gorge. It's just this beautiful canyon-like gorge full of trees and forests and beautiful waterfalls. Multnomah Falls, they say, is the most beautiful. I think Latourell Falls is more beautiful than Multnomah Falls, but Multnomah Falls is much larger, I guess, so I guess people think that that's even more beautiful. Then there's Bridal Veil Falls, which was definitely a beautiful hidden gem. So yeah, there's just, I mean, I could go on, you know, and then of course there's, you know, if you're a fan of history, there's lots of different, well, for one thing, we keep a lot of historic buildings up here. So when you drive around, you know, especially the city of Portland, there's a lot of Victorian buildings here. You know, it's amazing. And then there's, you know, a beautiful Edwardian mansion called Pittock Mansion, which I've been to it, but not in it. And so I still want to go inside. Yeah, it's just beautiful. It's just that, you know, there's a lot of stuff to do here, but it's all kind of spread out. Let's see. Lachlan says, I'm not too sure, Alex. I've always wanted to go to, I think you said America, and visit one of those areas. I like the autumn there, how all the trees lose their leaves. Here in Australia, none of the trees lose leaves. Really? That's interesting. You guys go through winter, though. I guess not everywhere that has winter loses leaves. I mean, in Southern California, hardly any trees lose leaves. Another reason why I didn't like Southern California, there was no seasons. I mean, it rained more in the winter, and it rained less in summer. But ultimately, it was almost always warm and hot and dry. It was almost the same weather year-round. I didn't like it. Up here in Oregon, there is a definite difference between the 4 seasons. And right now we're in spring, and despite all the rain, what you do notice is all the plants coming back to life. Oh my gosh, it's so beautiful. We just finished our cherry blossom blooming season. Beautiful, like here in the Portland region, the metropolitan region, we have a lot of cherry trees that we use. I guess they're planted for decoration, but nevertheless, they produce these beautiful cherry blossoms during this time of year. We just finished with the cherry blossoms, but everything else is blooming. And pretty soon, we're going to see a lot of the blackberry bushes start growing back. Those things grow like weeds. But then the good news is that in fall, the blackberries are all ready, and then me and my dad, we go out and pick a bunch of like there's a bush, like just a wild giant blackberry hedge just right outside my apartment building, and we've filled buckets full of blackberries. And the apartment complex, they let us do that because they're just weeds here. Blackberry bushes are just weeds. It's like, you know, it's like no one cares if you're picking blackberries because they're so bountiful and aplenty. You're not really taking anything away from nature. There's just so much of it. I mean, yeah, all the birds and squirrels and, you know, other animals that eat them couldn't possibly eat enough of them. There's just so much blackberries here. So, King of Battleship says, Alex, have you been to USS Alabama? No, I haven't. Oh, yes, I saw Steve's Queen Mary video yesterday. Top and President Line says, Alex, do you think that you might make any videos on lesser-known ships, trains, historic places, etc., since they might not be covered much on YouTube? I already have. And generally speaking, nobody knows that I've posted those videos because of the fact that they're not popular ships, trains, or historic places. So, like, for instance, historic place, just one of many that I've posted, was Fort Vancouver, which is just a few miles from where I live. Fort Vancouver is an amazing place that me and my dad kind of just discovered, and not even many people who live in the Portland region even know it's there. And I made a video about it. Nobody watched it. And then I did a video, let's see, ships. First thing that pops to mind is SS Rex. Not the one that a lot of ocean liner enthusiasts know. It's not the Italian ship, the ocean liner. It is a different ship that used to sit off the coast of Santa Monica in Southern California, and it was a gambling ship, and it got tied up in like issues with like the mob and the local police and stuff like that, and eventually people barricaded themselves on the ship to prevent themselves from being arrested by the police and stuff like that. Interesting story. Made a video about that. Nobody watched it. And let's see, trains. Well, most of my train content doesn't really get views. So I did a video about Forney locomotives, which are among my favorite locomotives, and over time it got good views, but if you were to pick any individual day of all this time it's been on YouTube, it's not a popular video. So I guess to answer your question is, I still to this day put out videos about lesser known things, but people don't watch it because it's lesser known. I guess maybe they see it in their feed and it just doesn't interest them or something, but I still do, and I will continue to do that in the future, but I've always put out videos of lesser known things. It's just that because it's lesser known, people don't even know I posted those videos. So always give it a try. I have several playlists. I have a playlist for historic places. I have a playlist for Disneyland. I have a playlist for Queen Mary. I have a playlist for ocean liners in general. And I have a playlist called Try It. That's where I post unpopular videos, because even though they're unpopular, that doesn't mean they're not good. I think you guys would really like it. So I have a playlist called Try It, and it's just full of like random videos that didn't do very well, but I think you guys would really like it. So yeah, definitely try those out. Okay, so let's see here. Okay. Mark Cooper says, do you cook with blackberries, Alex? Maybe Danish or muffins? I make blackberry pie, or sometimes blackberry cobbler. out of the blackberries. But mostly I make blackberry pie. That's what my family usually wants. And it takes like a huge like bucket full of blackberries, and I cook them down and stuff, and I make a pie out of it. And then when we have, which we always have leftover blackberries that we don't use in the recipe, we just eat those as a snack. You know, just like but like I remember like, you know, like for lunch as a snack, we would just have like a small bowl of blackberries and just eat those, and they're so good here. Like, you know, they're wild blackberries, but they're just so good. And then we also get wild strawberries, but those aren't tasty. Those are kind of tart, so we don't really eat them. But occasionally you come across a sweet one. But they're not very big, because they're wild strawberries, so they're not very big. They're very tiny. And you're lucky if you find a sweet one. So I don't really eat them. And plus the small animals, you know, moles and things like that, or other creatures, gophers. We get gophers here. They probably eat the strawberries before we can even get to them. So yeah, lots of stuff. Yeah, we are so, it's crazy because, you know, where I live, it is kind of a suburb, but it's surrounded by patches of forest. So there's just patches of forest and wetlands speckled all over the landscape where I live. And so the other day I was babysitting my sister's dog, so I had Freya with me for like several days. But the other day I went to take Freya out for her final walk of the night before we go to bed, and I took Freya out, and we're just kind of standing right outside my apartment. There's a lawn there, you know, and I see something in the darkness in front of me moving, and I'm like, what is that? I can't see because it's so dark outside. And then I see these two eyes looking right at me. And I'm like, is that a cat? What is that? And then, like, I kind of, like, you know, shift my weight. I'm just kind of, like, standing around, you know. And because I move, it, like, runs away. And it runs into the light. And its running spooked the others. More eyes suddenly showed up. And then they ran into the light after the other one. And it was a pack of 8 coyotes. Oh my gosh, I had never seen so many coyotes in my life. You know, when I lived in Southern California, I saw a pack of 3 coyotes once, and they tried to eat my puppy, but I scared them off. But this was 8. I had never seen so many coyotes in my life. And then as soon as I, like, went back upstairs, the whole pack started howling, and my dad could hear it, you know. He was asleep, but he, like, came out of his room, and he's like, is that coyotes? And, like, because it was so loud, because they were right outside the door. So I was like, yeah, that's coyotes, you know. And then I've seen a bobcat, too. So that was 2 years ago. I was walking, I take walks, and I was walking back into the apartment complex, walking past some cars, and underneath a big, giant truck, kind of just lounging in the shade, was what looked like a very large cat. And I was just like, oh wow, that's a huge cat, you know. And it saw me coming, and it dashed out from under the car and ran back into the trees. But as it ran back into the trees, I realized that wasn't a regular cat, that was a bobcat. They had these pointy ears with black tips. It was very fluffy with, like, a stunted tail. I know exactly what a bobcat looks like. That was a bobcat, and it was huge. And I was just like, wow, that is insane. So we get a lot of cool animals, and my favorite, though, is the bald eagles. I had, prior to moving up here to Portland, Oregon, I had never seen bald eagles before, but they live up here. They like the colder northern regions where there's lots of forests and stuff. And there's bald eagles all the time. I see them all the time, and I see them over by the wetlands. One time I saw a bald eagle just, like, flying, just following the river. And I was walking along the river, and here comes this big bald eagle, and it's just flying, using the river as a highway. And they're just, you know, beautiful, beautiful animals. I guess I'm still in awe because, like I said, I grew up in Southern California. It's like the most wild thing you'll ever see is a crow, or, you know, maybe a raccoon, you know, or coyotes on very rare occasion. So, you know, it's just not common to see such wild animals. But up here, there's such diversity. I was telling my dad, you know, you live in Southern California. There's three kinds of birds. There's crows, there's sparrows, and there's seagulls. I'm like, but up here, I'm still finding birds I've never seen before, and they're beautiful. We got these red-breasted robins. We got blue jays. We got blue-crested robins. I think that's what they're called. Hawks, ravens, and crows, bald eagles, golden eagles. I mean, it just keeps going on. And we get, like, all kinds of finches and stuff. Like, just tiny little finches and stuff. Amazing. Just absolutely amazing. Okay. So, let's see. Chris says, you should be packing some heat just in case of encountering a mountain lion or even a bear, because those things could easily kill you. Well, the good news is, where I live is too far for a mountain lion or a bear. I mean, I know I just spent all this time talking about how there's patches of wild, like, you know, land and stuff, but in the particular area where I live, it wouldn't be common at all to see a mountain lion or a bear, because we're just too far away from the big forests where there's, like, deer and elk. Like, I haven't seen a single deer or elk where I live, but I know that you go like 10 miles in any direction and you'll see them. But yeah, we don't get deer or elk where I live, so I don't expect to see a mountain lion or a bear. And of the 4 years we've been here, I've never heard of a mountain lion or a bear coming over here. So anything's possible, of course, but I think it would be very uncommon to see that. The biggest predators we have here is bobcats and coyotes, because the only prey that we have that is... What's the largest prey that we have? Honestly, the largest prey that we have is nutria and beavers. That's the largest prey. So I don't... I don't think we would see very many big animals. Nutria and beavers. That's funny, because sometimes you can't tell the difference between the two. But yeah. Frozen screen. Everybody says frozen screen. Footage is still working. Why would the camera be frozen? Let me check real quick. See what's going on. Oh yeah, it is frozen. What in the world? That's weird. Did something happen to the camera? No, the camera is still working. Why did this thing freeze? Oh dear. Okay, hold on. Okay, let me try something real quick. Try that again. Properties. Activate. That's so weird. Come on. Come on, come on. it does not want to run the camera now. What in the name of Mike? What does that mean? Oh, something is up with this camera. Okay, hold on. Oh, somehow. Okay, somehow. Okay, let me try that again. Oh. Okay, let's see if that worked. Nope, it did not. Shoot. I wonder what is happening. This. See, I'm not very savvy with technology, so if something goes wrong, I don't really know how to fix it. There we go. Okay, that should work. I'm watching my own live stream to see what happens. Let's see. All right. Oh, yep, there we go. All right. So yeah, the image came back temporarily, but it was still frozen. So when I waved my hand in front of it, you couldn't see my hand moving. So I still had to like disconnect it again and then reconnect it, and I don't know what went wrong, but that was really weird. Okay. So back on track. Okay, so the reason why I wasn't here last weekend, I can't say what day, but in this past week, I welcomed a new nephew into my life. So my sister had a baby, and so yeah, I have a nephew now, and it was really cool. And we got to, my dad and myself, we got to visit my sister in the hospital, congratulated my brother-in-law and stuff like that, so that was really neat. And the baby is really cute. He looks kind of like a Gerber baby. I don't know if, a lot of Americans remember Gerber babies, but yeah, absolutely just the cutest little baby. And but they had to spend several days in the hospital, so because her labor had to be induced artificially. I guess it was because the baby just grew really fast, and so the baby was like 2 weeks early, but she wasn't ready to give birth, but the baby was ready. So I guess that's the best way to describe it. So she had to spend several days in the hospital through the labor process, and then afterwards they wanted to keep the baby for just observation, make sure everything's going well, and everything did go well. And so now they're back home, and through all those days that they were while they were away from home, I had to take care of their cats, and I babysat their dog. The dog came to live with me for those days. The cats, they're fine on their own. They just need their food, their food every day, and their litter box changed out. But yeah, so I had Freya for several days. Some of you guys might remember Freya. I had her on a live stream once a long time ago. But yeah, so... Oh, thank you guys so much for the congratulations. Thanks. Yeah, it's been a really awesome past couple of days. I've really enjoyed it. I got water on there. So, yep, been really busy. But the other day, Freya got to go back home, and we introduced Freya to the baby. And we weren't really sure how Freya would react, because I don't know. She's a big dog, so if she gets really excited, she will like try to like jump on you and stuff. And we were really afraid that she would try to like jump on the baby. But no, she was very gentle, very, very gentle. I think she understood immediately that she couldn't be all crazy. And now she's like, just absolutely wonderful with the baby. Like she just sits there now and stares at him all day long, and she won't let the cats near the baby at all. So that's actually kind of a good thing. So yeah, she loves the baby now. So that was really good. We couldn't have asked for a better first meeting between dog and baby. But yeah, so I'm exhausted, as you can see. It's just been a lot. And Freya, she requires a lot of attention. So all these days, it's just been waking up early every day. I'm not much of a morning person, so having to wake up really early every day to take her on her daily walks and stuff like that. And she does a lot of walking, so we would be out for like every walk would be 45 minutes to an hour long. So it was a lot of physical exercise too. So yeah, it was a lot. But I love Freya. Freya is the best. She's the most loving dog I've ever known. So yeah, she's always a delight. So, all right. So yeah, that was last week. Now we'll get into a little bit of Queen Mary update. So I don't know if you guys have seen Steve's video on his. His channel is the Blue Ribband, and but he was on the Queen Mary yesterday, I want to say, and he filmed the new Margaritas on the Mary event that they're doing, which at first I was kind of skeptical. I was like, Margaritas on the Mary, like it just doesn't make sense. But when you see it, it's kind of like, okay, I get it. It's like a Southern California thing, So even though the Queen Mary is very much a British ship, they are kind of celebrating a California, delight kind of thing aboard. But it was pretty cool because they used a kitchen up on sun deck that they haven't used in decades. So it was interesting to see them use it, because they have these windows that these serving windows that open, and they were like giving people their margaritas from the window. At least I think that's where the margaritas were coming from. Pretty sure, because the tacos had a separate taco stand, but it looked good. The food looked good, and the margaritas looked good. So I guess people were allowed to walk around the ship with their margaritas and stuff. And the line for that looked incredibly long, which is good news for the ship. Because you want people to show up, spend their money on the ship. So that was very good. It was a very long line, and it looked like people had fun. So, that was a very good thing for the ship. Kat says it's also a bit funny to have the 4th of July on the Mary. That's true. It is kind of funny when you think about it. They should like do a reenactment of like the Boston Tea Party or something. Just throw crates of tea over the end of the ship. But yeah, I think what's happening with the Queen Mary is very positive. There's lots of good things happening. The ship is, still earning a lot of money. There's still a lot of people coming to the ship. The fact that you can go there on a Tuesday and there's a lot of people and the ship is just packed and the tours sell out. Like, that's a very good thing for the ship. I mean, I can't recall there being a Tuesday prior to the pandemic where the ship ever had a busy day. So, it's very good. was there anything else I was going to say about the Queen Mary? I don't think there's anything in terms of construction updates. Yeah, I don't think there was anything in terms of construction updates, because there's not really any construction happening right now. It's all kind of on pause, and I'm waiting for them to do more stuff prior to summer, but we're almost at summer now. And they haven't begun anything. But I don't know, what month are we in? April? No, May. I don't even know what the date is right now. We're in May. So I think maybe June or July I'll send Chris over there to do some filming. If there is anything for him to film. Because last time he went there was nothing for him to film. There was, nothing happening on the ship. Mark says, "May the 4th be with you." And also with you. I'm trying to think if there was anything else about the Queen Mary. I don't think there was anything about the Queen Mary, but what was the last topic? Talked about my nephew. Talked about the Queen Mary. I thought we might finish with Disneyland, but Wild Smiley says he was there on Tuesday, April 9th. Oh, yes, that's right. I forgot. And, and you had a great experience, right? Like that. I remember you telling me that you had a really great time. I'm glad, too, because, the Queen Mary is one of those things where the reputation, you either get a good first impression of the ship or you don't. And it's one of those things where it's like, I've been trying to get management to understand, like, there are certain things about first impressions. I think, they think of the Queen Mary as, let's get people back to the Mary. And I'm trying to tell them, you shouldn't just worry about the people who are returning. You should worry about getting new people. You should be looking for new people. So right now, their whole thing is, let's get people back to the Mary. And I'm like, you also got to focus on new people. Bring in new things. And those new people, when they come to the ship, they're going to see a lot of locked doors everywhere. You can't... I know I get on a tangent about this every single live stream, so I'm going to try not to do that. But yeah, I try to tell them, like, you gotta open more stuff up and let people wander through the stuff. You can't be worried if people are going to vandalize something. If you're that worried, have volunteer docents there to watch over the place. The fact that there's eyes on people will prevent more people from wanting to vandalize. And those who do vandalize will get immediately caught and removed before they can do any further damage. But it's a risk you have to take. Museums open their doors every single day knowing that someone might come in and throw some orange paint on the paintings and glue their hands to the wall. But they still open the doors. Like, you can't be afraid of vandalism. People need to be able to enjoy something. And you can't really... There's not much to do on the Queen Mary aside from getting a tour. And I've had so many people email me this past week saying, "Hey, Alex, I want to go to the Queen Mary, but I know enough about the ship that I don't want to book a tour. So what can I do?" And I have to tell them, I'm like, "I'm so sorry, but, even though you know a lot about the ship, your best bet is to book a tour, because all the places you want to see are behind lock and key. So, you need a tour to see that stuff." And so I told management, I'm like, I know you guys want to sell tours. I don't doubt it. I used to be a tour guide at Disneyland. I understand the need for selling tours. I'm like, but, the difference isn't that you're keeping people from seeing a beautiful room until they pay up money. It's that you're keeping people from learning something interesting until they pay up money. the sites should be available to see. You know, if not all of them, then at least a bit more of them than what they have now. You know, open up the main lounge, do daily activities in there, you know, have daily afternoon tea, have people up on stage performing. People who walk into the main lounge will want to come and sit. And if you really insisted on making money off of it, then sell those events. If there's going to be a comedian at 3 p.m. every day, you know, tell people you can only sit down and watch the comedian if you pay money for this seat. But let people walk through the room. Let people see it. Let it be, you know, furnished and upholstered, and let people see it in its glory, because the main hall is wonderful, the observation bar is wonderful, but those are pretty much the only Art Deco rooms you will get to walk through on the ship. Everything else is behind lock and key. And if you've come all this way to the Queen Mary, and you're forced to book a tour just to see something like the main lounge, only to find that it's a big, giant, empty room. Because I've heard people say, oh, yeah, the main lounge, you know, it looks so much prettier in the 1930s photos. What's the difference? And I'm like, you know, there isn't much of a difference, but the biggest difference is that there's no furniture. And the room was designed to have furniture in it. That's what makes it look good. You know, so it's one of those things where it's like, great, you're selling these tours, but you're still not furnishing the place. You're still not making it look presentable. You know, you gotta do something about that, you know, because you're going to get new people coming, but those people aren't going to want to come back. You know, the only people that are going to the Queen Mary, for the most part, are people who already love the ship. But you got to bring in new people. So, yeah, it's a lot. Wild Smiley says, oh, I loved it. I was aboard for 7.5 hours, and I wish I could have stayed longer. But I'm a Queen Mary fanatic and an ocean liner fan overall. I don't know if people that aren't as interested in all that will want to spend as much time as I did. Exactly. You are 100% right. Because there are people who go to the Queen Mary being told, here's this beautiful ship that you're going to be awed by. And they go there thinking, okay, I don't have much money. I'm not, you know, I've already spent a fortune on parking. I spent a fortune on admission tickets. I'm not paying for tours. And what do? They walk around the only available areas of the ship and see it in 2 hours or less and walk out. That's not good. You know, for a business, what you want is for people to spend the maximum amount of time in your business and spending all their money at that business. Let me just make sure my camera's working. Yeah, it's working. Okay. You know, so there should be very little reason for someone to leave your business if, you know, so yeah, it's upsetting, you know, but I also have to remember that it's also going to be baby steps, you know, the improvement of the ship and the ability for people to see the ship in a different light, see it as this great destination. It's going to take baby steps to get there. But I do worry that, you know, that they're resting on their laurels, you know, that they're going, you know what, the ship's open, let's just, you know, do cleanup projects from here on out, you know. Instead of, like, opening a new attraction, I'm worried that they're just going to be like, let's just keep cleaning up rooms and areas and that's it, you know, and that's wonderful. I would always welcome them to refurbish a room and make it look fresh and clean again. But there should be new attractions. There should be new things to do to occupy your time. And throwing bean bags into a Target hole is, you know, not something that people spend money to come and do, you know. So Stephen, yeah, that's something I see. I have a list of suggestions for things to do, and I've offered to give that list to management. They have not responded about getting that list. Obviously, they don't want to hear it. So, It is what it is, I guess. So, you know, I can't be angry about it, you know, but I can't. I also don't want to just sit there and be like, fine, okay, they don't want to hear my ideas, but they are good ideas, and that's one of the ideas. Is one of the ideas I had for them was to pay to have an app created where you could see the ship virtually, or I guess the true defining words would be AR, augmented reality. So you use your phone, and the idea is that you walk around the ship, and if you point your phone at something, you can see what it looked like in the 1930s. You know, so you can, you know, the idea is you walk around the ship and you can look around, you can see the ship as it looked in the 1930s. You could go down into the engine rooms, the boiler rooms, use your phone, and you can see what it looked like. You know, and that is a much cheaper option than actually going and building these things. Of course, I would love them to actually build three-dimensionally those rooms, or, you know, have them restored to what they looked like. But for now, you know, you could do augmented reality, and it would be expensive to make an app like that, but it would still be cheaper than building the real thing. But unless they ask me, I can't deliver those ideas to them. I've already given them 6 of my ideas. They've implemented, I think, 3 of my 6 ideas. But only the least important of my ideas. I gave them 6 ideas for what to do right now to make the ship successful. They took bits and pieces of 3 of those ideas, but only the lesser part. They ignored the rest. So it's just... It's frustrating, because I love the ship, you know. I know what people want to see when they go there. I know it. But it's hard to convince management that you know what you're talking about. You know, it's hard, because to them you're just some random guy off the street. To them, I'm some random YouTuber who talks about the Queen Mary. I don't even think they realize that my videos have really kick-started the popularity of the Queen Mary. You know, like, the videos I produced made a lot of people interested in the ship. I mean, I can't think of any Queen Mary video that got 1.5 million views from any other YouTube channel or anything like that. You know, my Queen Mary videos have really helped to re-spark an interest in the ship. And the management, either they don't know that or they don't really care. So I don't know. I don't know. Kat says they still have lots of maintenance work to do. Like you said, it needs a blast, not to bend upwards. What? Wild Smiley says furnish the... Oh wait, hold on. Cat corrected. Okay. So you said needs ballast to not bend upwards. Yeah, the center of the ship needs to be ballasted further. The upwards curvature at the ends of the ship is sheer, so it does need that, but it is hogging a little bit, so the center of the ship is kind of lifting slightly upwards, and that does need to be corrected. And plus, the ship is sitting a bit too high out of the water, especially because they removed those lifeboats, which lifted the ship almost, I think, like 9 to 10 inches out of the water. So it does need to be ballasted further back down. But yeah, definitely. Liam says that's a very universal problem with museums and history. Videos produced by institutions are usually pretty stodgy and receive very few views. That is true. When you have a historic video produced by a museum, very few people watch it. I think, and this, I mean, this is part of the reason why I started my YouTube channel, was because I saw the things I loved getting videos, but not getting views or people interested. And Walt Disney used to always say that if you're going to try to teach people something, don't talk down to them. You've got to entertain them. That's what will get them to learn something. So he believed in edutainment. In fact, he's one of the first people to use that terminology, edutainment, because he taught people things through entertainment. So that's one of the things I did with my videos, was I was like, how can I take historical facts and weave them into a narrative in such a way that tells it like a story, with a beginning, a middle, and an end, with conflict and resolution. That's what will keep people interested in these videos. And so that's what I was doing. Not all my videos are that way anymore, but I still to this day do that with videos. So my most recent video is my Pirates of the Caribbean video, and that included a conflict, the death of Walt Disney and not being sure what to do to finish the ride, and and not being sure what direction the company would go, but persevering, opening the ride and it saving the park. So, I like to take historic facts and weave them into a narrative to keep people interested. And yet it's still true. The stuff that I put out is still true. It's just the way it's said is what makes it interesting. Chris says, hey Alex, normies don't understand the power of YouTube. When it comes with the Armas Queen Mary, nearly everyone doesn't understand your YouTube channel. Nearly everyone doesn't understand your YouTube channel, especially people who run the Armas Queen Mary Museum ship. I'm not sure what you mean by that. Nearly everyone doesn't understand your YouTube channel. I hope they do. I make my videos in a way that I think makes the information easily understandable. I don't think I make it too wordy or complex. I don't know. Hello, Professor. How's it going? Taylor says, when you finally get to take your trip on the Queen Mary 2, is there anything you're hoping to experience while on board? Well, for one thing, I love food. I mean, I think that's apparent. but I am looking forward to the food, believe it or not. But mainly, I'm looking forward to the relaxation. I've never been on a ship before that's been out on the ocean, I've never been out on the ocean. So I don't really... I can picture it in my head. I can picture what the experience would be like, but being actually out there on that voyage will be very different. And so I guess I'm really excited to see what it's like. But one of the things I picture in my head that I really want to do is to just pick a seat on, I think it's deck 7. It's the one with the promenade that wraps around. Pick a seat, next to a window, and sit there and have a cup of tea and look out onto the ocean. Maybe see the sunset or the sunrise. I'll wake up early if I have to. That'd be something I really want to do. I don't know why, but that to me is just the picture of relaxation. Just sitting there with a cup of tea and looking out onto the ocean. I could stare at the ocean for hours. In fact, I'm one of those kinds of people where I could get really lost in my own thoughts. I could just sit down, sip some tea or coffee, and just really think about things for a long time. And I like doing that. I like thinking about anything, just things. My life, other people's lives, anything, So yeah, I picture myself just relaxing a lot. And I think that's what I look forward to most. I'm not really much for stage shows, so it's not like I'm going like, ooh, I gotta see a stage show on the ship or something. But I guess another thing I'm looking forward to, though, is they have a, what's it called? I don't remember what it's called. It's a big screen that comes down from the ceiling, and you can lean back in your chair and you can see like an almost three-dimensional sort of presentation on space. And I thought that was a really cool idea. I really want to see that. My friend Chris wants to see that too. So that's something I look forward to seeing when I'm on the ship. But yeah, just the voyage itself, just the journey, you know. I can also picture myself going to the library and, you know, pulling a book off the shelf or a magazine or something and sitting by the window and just kind of glancing between the ocean and the book and, you know, I don't know. That to me is fun. I know some people are like, oh, I want to go on a cruise because they got, you know, these water rides and they got entertainment up the wazoo, and that's not me. I'm the kind of person that would just like to sit by a window and watch the ocean go by. That's me. I'm boring, but I like it. So yeah. Let's see. John Hill, that's very true. Kat says, I heard Dark Harbor is coming back to the Queen Mary. I've never been, but I'm curious about this event. Yeah, Dark Harbor is coming back. I don't think it'll be a bad thing. I think this time they're going to be more careful with how they implement it, because in previous years they weren't careful. They just used the ship however they wanted to use it, and it resulted in some damage and some dangerous things. It's really crazy. You know, I used to design haunted mazes for... There was a hospital out in Downey, California that used to do haunted mazes every year, and they always, you know, hired my friend's nonprofit to do that. And so I was the guy who designed the mazes, and I would design them ADA compliant because most of our patients were most of our people going through the maze were hospital patients. And in one case, someone was being wheeled through in a gurney. So the whole maze had to be designed to be ADA compliant, and it had to be designed to be fire resistant because, you know, the hospital was very concerned about fire safety. And these haunt mazes are often built with nothing but flammable materials, like wood and stuff. You know, they're not built for fire safety, usually. Even the ones you go to at, like, Knott's Berry Farm or Universal Studios, those haunt mazes are not built fire safe. They are built to a certain degree, a certain standard. They're built outside, so that way if there is a fire, there's a fast way of getting out of them. But they're still made of wood, you know. So the hospital was like, you can't make the maze out of wood. It has to be non-flammable materials. So I had the added challenge of designing a whole maze out of non-flammable materials. But I did it, and it was possible. But the one that they do at the Queen Mary, they were not making it out of non-flammable materials. And you can't bring flammable materials onto a ship like the Queen Mary, because if there is a fire, it'd be very difficult to contain it. I mean, it's still possible, of course. The ship has lasted all this time with several fires, and it's never spread throughout the ship, knock on wood, because of the safety systems. But it's still, you don't want to introduce flammable materials to the ship. There's already enough wood on the ship as it is. But yeah, that's something I hope that they correct this time around, because it is possible to build a haunt maze with non-flammable materials. I've done it. So Chris says, what I mean is that they don't understand the popularity of your videos on RMS Queen Mary. Oh, yeah. That is true. I think that they don't see the correlation, the management doesn't see the correlation between a popular YouTube video about their Queen Mary versus the popularity of the ship. You know, one of the things I was just amazed by is that to this day, they do not put out videos about construction. For one thing, people love construction videos. They love to see the progress of something. You know, they like to see, you know, a project moving along. Especially people who are very into home improvement and stuff like that. They love watching channels like that. And the Queen Mary could earn a lot of ad revenue by producing videos about the projects that are happening all around the ship. Every time they repaint something, they could show the process of how it's done. But the thing is, they think that everything is too mundane for it to be interesting. They go, oh, well, all we did was repaint this cowl vent. And it's like, yeah, but if you have some showmanship, you can make that interesting. And that's where YouTubers come in. As a YouTuber myself, we find ways of making something that is otherwise uninteresting interesting. You know, I think I spoke a couple of times about how I made a video one time about the rivers of America at Disneyland. Somebody said to me, I can't believe that you made a video about water sound interesting. And it's like, it's true. It's like what we do is we make things sound interesting, you know, because, well, we have to. You know, so it is possible for the Queen Mary to put out updates about its, you know, refurbishments and reconstructions, but they don't see, they can't see the potential of such things. They go, oh, it's just updates. It's just, no one cares. We'll just put out a paragraph or something on Facebook. And it's just like, no. You know, if you can show people the work that's going on the ship, you're going to earn this huge following, and that following is going to provide you with a steady income, not just from ad revenue, but from people visiting the ship. They want to see with their own eyes the stuff that got changed. I can name, you know, right off the top of my head, there's like 10 people that went to the ship after they finished the repainting of the third funnel recently. So, you know, it's just like, you know, that kind of stuff can help earn them money, but they can't see it, because the reason why, and this has been the problem with Queen Mary ever since she came to Long Beach, the people that run the Queen Mary, they think of her as just a museum or a hotel. You know, if you're running, you know, a hotel like a Ramada Inn or something, it doesn't have its own YouTube channel for that specific hotel, at least. You know, it doesn't have its own updates of, oh, this is what we're doing this week with, you know, this room. We're going to repaint this room. They don't do that because obviously it's a hotel. Who cares? But the Queen Mary is not just a hotel, and the people who run it don't understand that. That's been the biggest problem with the Queen Mary ever since she came to Long Beach. Nobody who's run the Queen Mary fully understood the potential or what it means. And because of that, they miss out on all these opportunities to make money, to do interesting things. And then you have the people who are there to protect the ship, who don't even understand the importance of showing the ship off. You know, it's like, okay, I get it. Your job is to make sure that the ship is not being vandalized and that you're preserving it. Great, but what's the point in preserving something that no one's going to see? You might as well show it off. You know, if you have to, you know, do special events or something where only people who have RSVP'd, who've given, you know, their credit card information to, you know, to pay for that event can come. So if something goes wrong, you know who to bill, you know? It's the same thing with the hotel rooms. They could decorate the hotel rooms. They could put fine china and stuff like that up on the shelves and make the hotel rooms look interesting. They don't, because they're like, oh, people will just steal that stuff. Well, yeah. How do you think other hotels handle that? Oh, if they find a decoration from the room missing, they charge it to your card because they have your card on file, or they have your name or contact information. So it's like there's no reason why they can't decorate the hotel rooms on the Queen Mary. It's like they won't do it because they say, oh, well, we don't want people to steal these nice decorations. So charge it to them if they do. And charge them extra just for them doing it. Get a better decoration to replace it with the extra money. But, hotels have a right to charge people for vandalism. And they can do that. So it's like if someone carves their initials into the pillar of the main lounge, well, charge that person for doing it. Because, first of all, they have security guards at all the exits of the ship, so they can stop the person. And if you have volunteer docents who are standing around watching over everything, they can point out the person who did the vandalism, because they'll see it, because you have volunteer docents there. So what I'm saying is the people who run the Queen Mary often come back with, oh, we can't do this, we can't do that, we can't do this, we can't do that. And I'm sitting here going, there's a million ways how you can do something. You have to have the attitude that you can do this. You just come up with things. There are so many people who would be willing to donate their time and their effort for free to help restore your ship. But you're sitting here going, oh, I'm going to wait for city officials to come up with $5,000 to repaint this cabinet. And I don't know if that's the real price, but it's like, instead of waiting for that, come up with a plan. Be like, you know what? Here's 15 people online who do painting for a living. They're either artists or they paint houses, not the mob way, but the actual house painting way. Or, that kind of thing. Like, those people are willing to volunteer. I've gotten so many people all the time saying, Alex, how can I volunteer my time to help restore the Queen Mary? I've got this and this and this skills. And I'm like, that's wonderful, but they don't allow people to volunteer their time to restore the ship. Well, why? And I tell them, well, because the people who are in charge of taking care of the ship are afraid that you're going to ruin it. And they're like, how can I ruin what's already been ruined? How can I make it worse with my skills? And I'm like, that's the golden question. If there's something on the ship that desperately needs to be improved, like handrails, for instance, the wooden handrails outside on the upper decks, they're all peeled and chipping, and they used to have varnish and like a gloss over it to protect them. It's all gone now. The handrails are all gray and worn and weathered, and they're cracking from rot. I'm like, but here's these people who are carpenters for a living, and they know what to do to restore these handrails. And they're just handrails. It's like, let them do it for free. They want to do it for free. But there's people at the Queen Mary who are like, oh, but we're afraid they're going to ruin it. How can you possibly make those handrails look worse with the skills of a trained carpenter? How can he possibly make that worse? Let him in. For God's sake. Sorry, folks. Oh my gosh. It just, you know what I'm saying? Like, there's no reason. There's no excuse. But yet they come up with excuses, It's like, ugh. Jeez. I get so frustrated when I talk about the Queen Mary, because it's just like, I could think of a million ways to make everything better for the ship. But bureaucracy, oh my god, bureaucracy prevents it from happening. Let's see. Lachlan says, did you make the maze out of asbestos? I talked about making a fireproof maze. Did you make the maze out of asbestos? We just found out that our house is practically made of that stuff. We're not going to touch it, and we will just not disturb because it will cost too much to remove. To make the mazes fire resistant, instead of using wooden studs to put up walls, we would use the steel studs that are used in modern day buildings. They use steel studs now because they're stronger and longer lasting for a commercial building. So we used to use the steel studs. And then for the walls, instead of using plywood, because like a normal haunted maze, they would put up walls using wooden studs and plywood for the surface. Instead of doing plywood, we did drywall. Drywall is, under normal conditions, not flammable. I say normal conditions because you can set almost anything on fire, believe it or not. If the fire is hot enough, it will affect anything. But the point is to put in things that don't initially catch fire, and drywall doesn't do that. I believe some people call drywall sheetrock. I don't know why they call it sheetrock, but yeah, that's what. So you might know it as sheetrock. But yeah, drywall is what we used. And then for the props, a lot of times props are made out of all kinds of wood. You know, they're put together with wood, and maybe depending on what the prop is, there might be plaster on it, that kind of thing. Instead of making props out of wood, we made props out of bendable steel, metal. If we had to cover it with plaster, we would, you know, in order to give it a shape or something, depending on what it was, really. We would have prop tables and things like that, which were often, if we had to use wood, it was coated in a special varnish that was non-flammable, so it was designed not to catch fire. That kind of thing. But mainly we never needed wooden props at all. Most of the stuff that we built was mostly made of metal or plastic anyway, so we never actually really needed anything like that. Yeah, pretty much. We just no use of wood or anything at all, and that already made it easy. But yeah, and mazes often use cloth. They use like an actual linen or cloth to block off areas that they don't want you to go, that kind of thing. We didn't use that. We used a like a plastic tarp, but it was a very thin plastic tarp, so it was designed so it doesn't make a loud sound when you move through it, because we would have like hidden doorways and things for the actors to come out and scare people. And normally you would use cloth for that, and we didn't use cloth. We used plastic. It was actually cheaper, by the way, because you didn't have to pay for all that cloth. You just bought a bunch of like painter's plastic. It was like a black plastic, but a lot of painter's plastic, and it was cheap. Very cheap. Kat says, have they decided what they'll do at the SS United States? I don't know, actually. Someone would have to tell me, because I don't know. Mark says, unfortunately, no. Wild Smiley says, not yet, I don't think. Wild Smiley says, I work at a hotel. We'll charge the hell out of you for vandalism. Exactly, right? Like, that's the logical thing to do. If someone vandalizes your hotel room, or the hotel itself, you charge them for it. You know, that's all they have to do at Queen Mary, but there's people at the Queen Mary who don't think that way. They're just like, nah, we just won't let people around the historic areas. It's like, who are you? I know who the person is, but I'm not going to say it. But, yeah. Let's see. Gypsum board. That's definitely not something I've heard. Gypsum board. Chris says, Alex, does anyone from the RMS Queen Mary watch Battleship New Jersey Museum YouTube videos and seeing how popular videos are? Oh, I couldn't tell you if they do or don't. If they do, then they're just ignoring it. You know, they're just not understanding what they're doing. You know what I'm saying? Like, if management is watching those videos, then they're definitely not watching it to understand how can we emulate that. Instead, they're watching it as, oh, that's interesting. You know, so I don't think anybody's really seeing those videos and then trying to implement how to do that with the Queen Mary. I wish they would, you know, because as much as I love giving updates about the Queen Mary, it should be the Queen Mary who's giving those updates. It shouldn't have to be me. I mean, I love doing it, but that's the whole reason why I do it, is because they don't. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's messed up. It's just like, people love this ship. To them, it's their hobby. They visit it. They learn about it. It's a hobby. It's not just a hotel, and that's something that the management needs to understand. It's not just a hotel. It's not just a museum. It's something much more, something very unique, and it needs to be treated in a unique way. Mark says it would be very healthy for the highly skilled retired committee, for example, to lend a hand on the Mary. I know when I retire in a few years, I would love to volunteer at a museum. In fact, I will be. Yeah, I would love to do that too. I've often thought about that, you know, like if I got really old one day, I'd, you know, and because I mean, technically what I do doesn't require retirement necessarily. But if there was a time in my life where I felt that it was time for a change, and, you know, I would want to work at a museum. I would want to be a tour guide or something. I love that kind of... I was a tour guide at Disney. That was my favorite job. I loved walking people around the park and just telling them about everything they wanted to know. And I miss doing that kind of thing. It certainly didn't pay a lot. It was ridiculous. You want to know how greedy the Disney company is? People would pay... This was back in 2012, by the way. This isn't this year's money. Back in 2012, people would pay a minimum of... What was it? I think it was approximately $1,800. A minimum of $1,800. Yeah, minimum $1,800 for I think it was a 6-hour tour with me. It's 6 hour because I was not just a tour guide. I was basically your butler for the day. Like, I went around the park, did everything for you, got you reservations at your favorite restaurants. You didn't have to worry about a thing. I'd set your table for you. If you were eating at a burger joint, I'd set your table for you. You know, got all your fast passes, did everything for you. If, you know, even part of my job was like, if someone in your party was like, oh, I'm going to take the baby back to the hotel room, my job was to escort them back, you know, and that kind of thing. Like, I did everything for you. That was my job. So they'd pay a minimum of $1,800 in 2012 money to do that. And yet, I got paid $10 an hour. So that was not a good paying job for me. And I was mad because there was one time where, like, I was with a big group of people and they wanted us for the full, like, I had to work, what was it, 12 hours? Because it was also overtime. So yeah, 12 hours for this special group. And because it was such a huge group, and because it was for 12 hours, I think they were paying something like $6,000. $6,000 for me to accompany them in the park. And that whole day, for that whole, like, 12 hours, I got paid, I think, I if I remember the calculations correctly, it was $10 an hour, 12 hours. Yeah, that's it's $120. I got paid overtime, so that was 4 hours of overtime pay, which was time and a half. So that's an extra 2 hours. So I got paid $140 that day. $140 for a tour that cost my clients $6,000. That's not fair. That's not fair to them or to me. So, yeah, that was. Ugh. Let's see. Steven says, now that's owned by the city. Get a counselor on board to have a properly structured volunteer group. Oh yeah, there's it's Stephen. Stephen said, now that the ship is owned by the city, get a counselor on board to have the property a properly structured volunteer group. Yeah, there's been a lot of people who've been trying to convince the city to do that. Me and a lot of other people have tried to convince the city to do that. The city has never told us why, but they are not willing to do that. They don't want volunteers working on the ship. They say it's a liability issue. If somebody gets hurt, that the city could be liable. And I'm like, but there's ways around that. I mean, there's reasons why there's volunteers working at museums all over the country doing very dangerous jobs, and yet they're covered by insurance. What's so impossible about the ship that you can't have volunteers there? So I think they're lying. I think that they just don't want people there. Like I said, there's a person at the Queen Mary who their job is to protect it and to preserve it. And I think they go overboard with their job. I think that they are so overboard they won't let anybody touch the ship. And that's not fair. It's not just the City of Long Beach's ship. It's not just their ship. It's everyone's ship. It belongs to the world. It is a world treasure. Yeah, let people help. It's like I'm talking to them right now. Let people help. It's just, yeah. Mark said, Mark's talking about when I was a tour guide. He said, for professional services, it's positively criminal, should be illegal, because I wasn't paid properly for that. I hope your tips were extortionate. Tips. Working at Disney, nobody was allowed, unless you were a server at a fancy restaurant, nobody was allowed to accept tips. So as a tour guide, I was not allowed to accept tips. I always had to give money back. So yeah, I did not work for tips at all. Did not get. I've had many people who are like, "Oh, here's $100, as a tip." I couldn't accept it. I'd literally have to tell them, I'm like, "I'm sorry, I cannot walk away with that tip in my pocket. Like, it's this the company would fire me if I did that." I was not allowed to accept tips. So yeah, I literally only earned $140 that day. That was it for that $6,000 tour. So yeah, I was worth a lot to the. Oh, they're swimming. I was looking at the live stream and I'm like, why is that guy like half naked? It's because they're swimming in the swimming pool. So yeah, it just wasn't fair. It's just unbelievable. I did all kinds of stuff in that department. I wasn't just a tour guide. I wasn't just a private host. I mean, there were days where I was assigned to work at there's rentable lockers for people who bring like extra bags and stuff to the park and they don't want to haul it around. They can rent a locker put their bags in the locker. Well, when I would work that shift, that was part of my job at the tour department. Sometimes you would just get a shift where you had to monitor the locker room area, and mainly the job was like if people said, hey, I rented this locker but it won't open, and so I'd have to go there and troubleshoot and stuff like that. So I had to know how the computer system operated to open the lockers and stuff like that, and then help people with their transactions. Sometimes the machine would overcharge them. It wasn't common, but it happened once where the machine overcharged them, had to find a way to give them back money from our own till, which wasn't even... The lockers were handled by a separate company, but Disney had to pay the people back for the money that it charged. So, yeah, it's just... I did so much at that job, and I loved it, but it just didn't pay enough. I got paid $10 an hour, and I was like, this is not worth it. Even in 2012, I'm like, this was not worth it. I'm like, that's just a lot of work, as much as I loved it. So people ask me all the time, they say, Alex, how... because they think I'm like a huge Disney... Well, I was a huge Disney fan. And they say, how come you don't work there anymore? I said, because simply, they just didn't pay enough. I'm like, I was working for peanuts. It was ridiculous. The one thing I looked forward to was like it seemed every month or so they did like a little cast member appreciation kind of thing, and they would do like a free barbecue for us cast members, and then eventually they stopped doing that, and I'm like, okay, now this is definitely not worth it. They don't even appreciate us enough to do like these little treats for us. Okay, so let's see. Russell Cooper says, why did ships have a funnel that didn't function? Were people that thick 100 years ago? As far as I know, there is no ship that had a funnel that didn't function. They functioned in a different way if they had to, but there were no ships, as far as I understand it, that had a funnel that didn't function. Like the Titanic, for instance, everybody likes to say that the fourth funnel was a dummy funnel. It was non-operative. It was operative. It ventilated smoke from the various kitchens aboard the ship. Those kitchens used coal to heat their stoves and ovens, and that coal smoke has to go somewhere so it doesn't poison people. So the funnel ventilated that. It also ventilated the smoke from the first class smoking room, and it also helped blow out exhausted air from the ship. So the ship was constantly circulating air. Air would come in through the various cowl vents on the top of the ship and get forced into the various rooms and halls aboard the ship, and then that air would have to go out somewhere, and a lot of it went out straight through that funnel. So that funnel did exhaust stuff. It exhausted kitchen smoke, and it exhausted old air from the ship. So it was functional. And as far as I know, I can't think of any ocean liners that had a truly non-operating funnel. They all did something. So, yeah. Mark says, what? No tips in the U.S., really? Yeah, Disney... There are good and bad things to everything Disney does, right? Like, the bad thing about not getting tips, and not getting paid enough, it sucks, But, on the other hand, the reason why they do it is so that way people who are spending all that money on a tour don't feel like, oh, great, I spent all this money on a tour, and now I still have to tip my tour guide. They didn't want the extra burden on the guest. But at the same time, relieving that burden from the guest put stress on people like me because we didn't get paid enough for what we did. You know, and the sad thing is about working at Disney is everybody understands that they are underpaid. So if you complain about it to anybody that works there, they don't want to hear it because they're going through the same thing. So there was nothing I could do about it. You know, like I was being greatly underpaid, but if I went to, you know, my coworkers and said, oh my gosh, I'm only getting $10 an hour for what I do, they'd be like, join the club, buddy. I don't want to hear it, you know. And the same thing with management. You told management and they're like, okay, well, every one of your other coworkers is being underpaid as well. What do you want us to do about it? It was just like, you know. But another thing that really made me mad about working at Disney is in the past, a long time ago, decades ago, they used to hire managers off the street in the sense that if you were qualified to manage a restaurant or manage some kind of business and you know, passed your application process, then you could work as a manager at Disneyland, right? And they had a lot of success doing that. But over time, Disney was like, we don't want to bring people in off the street because they don't understand the park. Which, I get that. I get it. You know, there's a lot of people that came to work for Disney and they thought, oh, this is going to be some easy job where I just get to, you know, mess around and, you know, escort Mickey down Main Street. And it's like, no, dude. You've come to work. I can't even say it. I'll just say something else instead. I'd be like, no, dude. You came to work your butt off and, you know, there's no relief, you know. And so they'd realize that the job was really difficult and you got paid so little for it. And they'd be, you know, they'd be like, why does anybody work here then? And it's like, honestly, it's because we love Disney so much. And that's the sad thing. How sad is that? The people who work there are still there because they love the company they work for. But the company they work for does not love them that much. How sad is that? That's why I left. I was being so mistreated there. I mean, you guys know me. Like, you've seen me from my live streams. I'm a nice guy. But one thing Disney did not like about me was that if I see something wrong, I say it. Disney does not like that. You know, I remember one time, you guys are going to hate this story, but you're going to love it at the same time. This is a great story. When I worked as a busboy, one of those people that clears plates and stuff from tables, wipes down tables, takes out trash, mops, that kind of stuff, part of my job was also to work in kitchens and wash the dishes. And we had these huge industrial dishwashing machines, but nevertheless, if you got parts from a charbroiler, for instance, you would have to scrape off the fat and scrub it down and use all kinds of chemicals. You had to know how to use the chemicals. And I worked at this restaurant called Hungry Bear in Critter Country at Disneyland, and they do charbroiled burgers. And the burgers are pretty good because they're charbroiled. The charbroiler had a grease pan underneath to catch all the burger grease as the burgers went through the conveyor system. And that would fill up, and my job was to scrape off as much of the fat off of the tray as possible and throw that away. And then you had to use chemicals to scrub the grease pan off to get it perfectly clean, because they did not accept anything looking dirty. The kitchens at Disney are the cleanest kitchens I've ever seen anywhere. And I've worked at a lot of restaurants and stuff. Disney is very good with that. But the way that they get it done is just unbelievable. So here's the story. I was doing that. I was cleaning off the grease pan, and I realized that that day it was just particularly difficult. I needed to use a chemical agent that was a very powerful degreaser. I needed it. Otherwise, I'd be sitting there all day scrubbing this thing, and it wouldn't be clean. So, per my training, I knew that to use this chemical, I needed to wear personal protective equipment because it was very caustic. And so that required having like a plastic apron, like a whole visor, everything, and then these really thick, heavy gloves that had to go over my hands. And so I went to where we store that stuff, and it's empty. And I'm like, where's the protective equipment? So I thought, like, okay, I'm going to ask my shift lead. Shift lead was gone. They said, oh, he's at lunch. I'm like, okay, well, let me talk to the manager. They're like, oh, managers are at lunch. I'm like, okay, well, what about this shift lead and that shift lead? No, they're at lunch too. I'm like, wait, so everybody who manages this restaurant, all the managers and the shift leads, they all went to lunch at the same time together? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, who's running this restaurant? They're like, us, And I'm like, oh my God. I look through the window into the manager's office, which is locked, by the way, and I can see that they had, like, a plastic apron just kind of piled in the corner. And so I knew that they had at least some protective equipment in there. And I went looking around, and I'm like, okay, well, for the life of me, I cannot find the shift leads. I cannot find the managers. They're not eating at the regular lunch place that they eat at. I'm like, so I need to finish this because they need that charbroiler right now. We're about to go through a really crazy dinner rush, and they need the charbroiler running. So I thought, okay, if there's no managers, if there's no leads, the next person with any sort of authority is a trainer, a person who trains people. So I went and found one of the trainers, and I said, what should I do? Should I just get this thing done? And the trainer said, yeah, they need the charbroiler, and they won't accept it dirty, so you have to use that chemical. Just put on an extra apron or something, thicken up your gloves, put more gloves on, and just do it. So I did, and I got that thing clean. But by the time I got it clean, I felt like a pain on my stomach. I looked down, and I was bleeding through my apron. The chemical, as I was spraying it off of the charbroiler grease pan, had wet my apron, and that chemical had leached through onto my skin, through my clothes and everything. And it was causing my skin to melt off of me, essentially. Not terribly bad, but enough to make me bleed. And it was doing that to my hands and my arms as well. And immediately, one of the shift leads came back from lunch, and they're like, how you doing? I'm like, hi, I just did this, but now I'm bleeding. And they're like, oh, go immediately to the nurse. We had a nurse on site for people who get injured. So I went to the cast member nurse, and they had me take a shower, and then afterwards they had to like dress my wounds and stuff, and it was really crazy. And then they told me, don't come back to your shift tomorrow, stay at home and get better. So I said, okay, I'll do that. So I come back on the next available shift. I stayed home the next day, obviously. I recovered and was still wearing bandages and stuff when I came back to the job the next time. And the manager's like, oh, good, you're here. I'm like, yeah, I'm about to clock in. They're like, good, clock in, come to our office. I'm like, okay, great. Clock in, go to their office. All my managers are right in front of me. They're all sitting there like it's some kind of intervention. I'm like, what's going on? They're like, shut the door. So I'm like, okay, so I shut the door, and I sit down, and they're like, so we have to issue you this, what was it called? It was, I forget what it's called, but it was a disciplinary action that puts a mark on my record. And because of that mark, at this time, I was trying to get into guest relations where I would be a tour guide, and I had to have a clean record to do that. Okay? They wanted to put a mark on my record for getting injured, right? And I'm like, wait a minute. I'm like, why am I getting a mark on my record? They said, oh, because you used a chemical agent that you knew was caustic and you still used it. And I said, yeah, I had to because the protective equipment was locked in the office. And they're like, we don't know what you're talking about. The protective equipment is in the protective equipment case. I said, no, it was empty. They're like, go check it. I go around the corner. All the equipment, all the personal protective equipment is in the case. I'm like, I went back and I said, no, that thing was empty when I was here that day. It was completely empty. I said, and I saw the plastic apron here in the office with the office lights off and the door locked because you all went to lunch at the same time. They said, Alex, we cannot all go to lunch at the same time. Someone must be here to manage the restaurant. And I said, no. I know all the managers that were here that shift that day. I said there were 3 managers. I listed which one. And I said, and these were the leads. I gave them the 2 different leads, the shift leads. I said, all 5 people were at lunch at the same time. I was told that by many people who worked at the restaurant. I'm like, and if you were here, I would have seen you because there's only one room, and that's the kitchen. I'm like, so they're like, well, they're like, nevertheless, you should have known better and not used that thing. I said, what was I supposed to do? Hand them a dirty dish? I was like, and have them use that? I'm like, if a health inspector came through here and saw that, he would mark us for that. And I was like, what was I supposed to do? They're like, oh, you should have gone to some kind of manager for assistance. I'm like, nobody was there. And I said, so I went to the next person in line of power who was a trainer. I'm like, and the trainer told me to do this. I told them the name of the person. And they brought that person into the office later, and he said, yes, I told him to use that. But he got off scot-free, right? They just, So they said, you have to sign this. I'm like, I refuse to sign it. I'm not going to have this mark on my record because you guys abandoned this place and you left me to do this job, and I had no choice. If I had refused to wash that dish properly, they would have complained to you guys that I didn't do it. And so they were like, well, I'm sorry, Alex, but these are the rules. I'm like, well, I would like to speak to, the managers have a head location manager whose name is the same as the Halloween movie bad guy, Mike Myers. That was his name. I said, I want to speak to Mike Myers. And they're like, well, I'm sorry, but he is in agreement with us that you were in the wrong. And I said, well, I'm not signing this thing. They said, if you refuse to sign this thing, we will have to make the disciplinary action even worse because you are not complying with your management. And so I'm like, fine. So I signed the darn thing. And I was upset. And, I was distraught. I mean, I went for days working, and I'm like, this place is the worst place I've ever, not just Hungry Bear Restaurant, Disneyland. It was the worst place I've ever worked at. And I wanted out of there. And I had this manager. So remember how I said there was my restaurant managers, then there was Mike Myers, who was the location manager. Well, just between the managers and Mike Myers was an intermediate person. I know there's a lot of managers. And they managed that particular land, right? The restaurants in that particular land, which Critter Country was considered part of New Orleans Square restaurant management because Critter Country has only one restaurant. So I went to the New Orleans Square land restaurant manager, who was a guy I knew since I first started working at Disney. And I'm like, look, I want to, go to guest relations. I'm like, I want to be a tour guide. I'm like, but I have this mark on my record. And I explained the whole thing to him. And, and he was like, well, I'm sorry, but you're in the wrong. And I'm like, I want to move out of here. And he was like, well, you have to live with your consequences. And I looked at him and I said, Thomas, I know you don't like me. I know nobody here likes me because I speak up when things I think are wrong. I said, you're either going to be stuck with me for another 12 months or you take this off my record and let me move out of here and out of your hair. And he like looked at me and was like, okay. So he took the mark off my record because he didn't want me there. He was happy to let me move out of there. So he took the mark off my record. That is the only time where I have been truly thankful that someone hated me. Because if he didn't hate me that much, I would have stayed there for another 12 months. So thankfully he hated me enough to kick me out. And I went and moved to guest relations, and I had a great time. So, yeah. But that was only one story out of seemingly unlimited stories I have of being mistreated by management at Disney. And these managers, let me tell you, they're not professionals who went to school to be managers. No, they're people like I was, who started off as a busser or a waiter or something, and they just moved up in the ranks over the years. But they're still those teenagers from 1980, 1970 who hired in, and now they think they're, you know, the most amazing people on earth because they're a manager at Disneyland. You know, like, I was just like, I couldn't stand that place. It was so toxic, you know. And I was always standing up for people who were wronged. You know, I was thinking the other day, when I was a teenager, I kept a journal, or a diary, whatever you want to call it. I kept a journal. I wrote every day in my journal, this is my day today. And during my first years at Disney, I wrote about my first, you know, years at Disney. I would come home and after work and talk about my day, and I kept it in my journal. And I was rereading that journal a week ago or so, and I saw a name in there I hadn't heard in a long time, Stephanie. She was a friend I had when I first started working at Disney, and we have been great friends. I was reading through the journal just going like, oh my gosh, we went to all these places, we did all these fun things. Let me tell you about Stephanie. All she wanted was to move up to be a shift lead. She didn't want to be a manager. She didn't want to be anybody of high power. She just wanted to be a shift lead. And the reason why is because she liked the restaurant she worked at, and she just wanted to move up and do that, and she'd be happy, you know. But she was a low-level cast member like me, and no matter how many tests she passed, no matter how many, you know, the management, when you wanted to move up, they would make you do things. They would make you like do missions. Like you'd have to like one guy, he had to redo the safety steps for how we unfurl the table side umbrellas because they block out the sun when you're sitting and eating, and there's a safety manual for how to open and close those, believe it or not. So the management said, look, our safety manual for that is really old. Why don't you redo that? And that's like one of the things that they would do. And depending on how well you did at those little missions, we called them, that could affect whether or not you would move up to becoming a shift lead. So they had Stephanie doing all these things, and she was working really hard, and always they denied her moving up to a shift lead, and they promote somebody who was totally underqualified for that. Right? Somebody who really was like some teenager who didn't care, right? But Stephanie did, and she was really good, and people liked her. But the management didn't like her, because instead of goofing off and being some silly teenager, she was very mature for her age. And let me just first say that the management who did not move her up, they weren't men, they were all women. So it's not like this was like, the men didn't want her to move up kind of thing. All the managers were women. But nevertheless, they only like brought in the most idiotic people. And I remember even after I moved into guest relations, Stephanie was still trying really difficult to, you know, very, very hard to continue passing her tests and her exams to move up to being a shift lead, and they would not promote her. And one day I go to visit her at that location, and she's not, you know, there. I'm like, oh, does she have her day off? I was asking people I knew. They said, didn't you hear? I said, hear what? They said, Stephanie died. And I said, how did she die? And she used to ride her bike to work every day. She lived nearby. She would ride her bike to work every day. And a guy was driving his car, making a right-hand turn around a corner. She was about to cross the street with the pedestrian signal light was on, showing that she had the right of way. But this person did not come to a full stop as they were driving up to the corner, and they hit her as she had rolled off of the curb, and she died. And she died on the corner of Catella and Harbor Boulevard, which is just outside the Disneyland property. And that was her life. Unbelievable. She was the most amazing, most brightest, funny young woman I've ever known. And she was so smart. And she loved Disneyland. And all she wanted was to be a shift lead. And for a full year, after I think she did 4 different tries to be a shift lead, and 4 different times they did not accept her, and then they'd promote some other, dummy who didn't need to be a shift lead. So I was pretty upset. That's when I kind of knew. I'm like, this place is evil. I was like, this place is just evil. This place is just pure evil. So yeah, I miss Stephanie. And I'm so sad that happened to her. So, yeah. I'm like reading everybody's comments now. Sorry I went off on a tangent, you guys. I'm so sorry. But that's one of the things that it's just like, when people ask me, oh, if you loved Disneyland so much, how come you don't work there? I'm like, it's because you realize that this place is just awful. It's toxic and it's awful. And I made all these friends there, and after I left, some of them who I thought were my friends, they'd be like, oh, you have a YouTube channel now? Oh, you think you're so popular and blah, blah. I'm like, no, that's not what this is at all. I just love sharing my knowledge of Disneyland. And they just, I don't know what it was, but they were, you know what? I know what it is. It's immaturity. You hire in as a teenager, and you never stop being that teenager. You can be 50 years old, having worked at Disneyland for 30 years, and you just don't grow out of your teenager phase. It's like as soon as you work there, you're stuck at that age. I don't know what it is, but that's how it is there. One time I worked there as a cook. I worked at the Blue Bayou and Club 33. If you know Club 33, it's a elite club at Disneyland. I was a cook. One of my chefs, he was the head chef. He was a really nice guy, and he was married, but he was like having an affair with some other cook that was working there. I was like, what is this guy doing? And by the way, this guy was a head chef, and he couldn't cook. He couldn't cook for the life of him. Everything he cooked was terrible. I was just like this guy. These people came into Blue Bayou, and were like, hey, we want the chef to cook us something special. And the chef said, I'll do that for you. I'll definitely. So he came back, and he was asking me to help him get him ingredients. My job that day was to work the broiler, and I had to stop working on the broiler because the chef wanted me to get him ingredients. So here I am going back and forth getting him ingredients. He was making a pasta that he put milk into a pan, a saucepan, and started heating it up, and then mixed it with fresh tomatoes and what was it, parsley, or was it cilantro? Well, either way, it wasn't a good idea. Parsley or cilantro went in there, and then he tossed the noodles with that, and then he got pancetta. And pancetta is like it's like ham. It's a cured pork product. I don't remember exactly what pancetta is, but we had it in cubes. Threw pancetta in there, and then served it on a plate, and it was all liquidy. It was just hot milk with ingredients in it. I'm like, I'm thinking in my head, like, that is not food. I'm like, that's hot milk with stuff in it. And I'm like, what in the world? And that was my head chef. I'm like, I knew more about cooking than he did. And not because I went to culinary school, although I think that did play a part, but even before culinary school, I knew how to make a sauce, like, it wouldn't have been hard for him to make, like, even an Alfredo sauce would have been time consuming, but easy. He just heated up milk and put ingredients. What is this, like, what in the world? So it's just like, at one point I had to stop in it. One of my chefs, the lower level chefs, he was great. Loved this guy. He had great ideas. He one time created this risotto that was like, it was like a split pea risotto. I know that sounds weird, but it was green. It was bright green. But when we ate it, it was so delicious. I was like, oh my God, this is like the most delicious risotto I've ever had. This guy was a culinary genius, but he had to work for the head chef who couldn't even cook. And what happened was, they had a competition. The resort head chef had said, we want Blue Bayou to come up with something for spring. And so they had the different chefs in our restaurant competing with each other to create a dish for spring. And the chef that I liked, he created a pork chop with the split pea risotto underneath. And then I think there was parsnips, roasted parsnips that was laid on top of the risotto, and then the pork chop went over it. It was a bone-in pork chop. Most delicious dish I've ever seen. He had a special, like a sauce that was surrounding the whole plate. Delicious. And he won the contest. He was allowed to have his dish featured at the Blue Bayou restaurant for that season. And when the resort head chef came to the restaurant to see, he asked our head chef, all right, let's see this dish. And so the resort head chef tried it, and he was like, this is amazing, this is great. And our head chef said, thank you, right? He made no mention that the lower level chef, the one I liked, created that dish. The head chef did not tell the resort chef that. He accepted the credit for it. And man, that broke the chef I liked. That broke him that day. When he went home that night, you could see that something in him had just totally snapped. And I did not blame him at all. I would have been, oh man. So yeah, it's just, oh Lord. I got all kinds of stories about working at Disneyland, let me tell you. That's cold already. So, sorry, am I boring you guys with these stories? I feel bad. I just keep talking about it, but I can't help it. All right. Well, it's 3:18, which means we've been here for 2 hours and 20 minutes. I suppose I should wrap this up now, because usually I try to only do this for 90 minutes. Oh, thanks. So everybody's like, no, not boring, interesting stories. Well, maybe I can think of a happy story to finish on. Chris says, no wonder why people go postal. Oh, totally. Oh, man. There was when I worked there, this was like 2011, there was a outdoor vending cast member in Toontown who created a dry ice bomb, right? He took an empty water bottle, put dry ice in there. I don't know how to make these bombs, so I can't tell you what else he did, but I know that's what he did. And he made that thing, and it exploded in the middle of Toontown. Of course, security was all over it. The guy was pummeled to the ground, and then he was later fired. And this was on the evening news that day. And I'm just like, it's like no wonder people do stuff like that. Because as a cast member, you're so beat down by the job. And, you know, ironically, the guests who visit the park weren't our biggest problem. Oddly enough, I mean, yeah, I've had rude guests here and there, but my biggest problem was the management. The management, there was only, of all the years I worked there, maybe a handful of managers I actually liked. The rest were just terrible people who had no integrity, who had no decency or kindness in their hearts. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's because when they first started working there, people treated them badly, and they thought, now I'm a manager, now I can treat other people badly and get back at them. I don't know, but they were just awful people. And I felt bad, because there's so many cast members there who, like I said, you're getting paid very little. So if you're still there, you're there because you love Disneyland. But the company does not love you that way. So sad. But yeah, oh yeah, Chris, see you later, Chris. But I suppose I should end on maybe a positive story about Disneyland. That might be fun. So there, I was working at City Hall one day, and there was a family who was pushing their really old grandmother in a wheelchair up to the desk. They were speaking to my coworker right next to me. So I'm like right next to them, and I'm helping one guest with his tickets or something. Oh, Renaissance Prometheus, thank you so much for a cuppa. Thanks for the donation. Love it. Let's give that a... Can I give that a heart? I can. There we go. So they push up the old woman with the wheelchair, and what they're getting is they're getting like a disability pass, because the grandmother, obviously, she could not stand in lines. She had to, like, you know, be specially loaded onto certain rides in a certain way. So she needed a special pass for that. And so they're getting her the pass, and my coworker asks her, like, oh, you know, what are you planning to... Like, what are you looking forward to the most here at Disney? And the woman was like, well, you know, we're here to meet Mickey Mouse. You know, the grandmother is... her favorite Disney character has always been Mickey Mouse ever since she was a kid, and she's never been to Disneyland before, and she wanted to come here and meet Mickey. And so, like, that's great, that's wonderful. And so they ended up coming back later in the day. I was still working at the desk. And I remember my coworker seeing them and going, oh, did you guys get to meet Mickey Mouse today? And the people were like, oh, no, you know, we're so... Mickey was just never around. Like, every time we tried to get in line to meet Mickey, like, eventually he'd have to leave, and we wouldn't get to meet Mickey. So, you know, so the old lady was like, oh, he's very busy, you know. So, so I remember my coworker going to the back room and kind of like thinking of an idea. This is one of the great things when we worked at guest relations, the things that we could do for people. She comes back out and tells the family, why don't you come back here in an hour, right? And, you know, I might have something for you. And they're like, oh, okay, you know. So they go, and my coworker arranges for Mickey Mouse to come to City Hall. And what happens is an hour passes by, the family comes back with the old lady, and they're led into the mayor's office, which a lot of people don't know this, but if you go to City Hall at Disneyland, they do have a mayor's office in there, and it's all nicely furnished with antique-looking furniture. And so they brought them into the mayor's office and closed the door. Meanwhile, from backstage, Mickey arrives, and he comes through the back door of City Hall, and we lead him into the back door of the mayor's office. And so when we open the door to the mayor's office, in walks in Mickey, and you could hear the gasps from the family, and it was just wonderful. They were happy to see Mickey Mouse. And when it was time for Mickey to leave, he left out the back door, out the back way, and he was gone. And my coworker went to see to the family and, see how their meeting went with Mickey Mouse, and then they went on their merry way. And a bunch of us went out back to ask the coworkers, how did it go? Did she like meeting Mickey? And my coworker told us that the old woman was so ecstatic to finally see Mickey Mouse, because she had grown up seeing the cartoons in black and white, never met Mickey before, and she was so happy to finally have met Mickey. And her words were, "I can't believe that Mickey took the time out of his day to meet me." So she was just ecstatic, and she was so happy, and it made her day. I think about a month or so later, we get a letter to our department from the family. And in the letter, they said that as soon as the family returned home, I think they lived on the other side of the country, as soon as they returned home, the old woman passed away in her sleep. But for the time remaining she had, her final days in her life, she spoke every day about how happy she was to have been able to meet Mickey Mouse. That was definitely one of the highlights of working there, was the things that we could do to create moments that made people's lives just a bit more special, So that was definitely something that we loved. So, yeah. I have a lot of happy stories of working at Disney, but yeah, they are few and far between. So, let's see. All right, folks. Well, I think I'm going to get going now, because it's already almost 3:30 p.m. We've been on here for 2.5 hours, but I want to thank you guys so much for watching the live stream and showing up here. I'm going to try to do another tea time next Saturday as well, and I've also got to get a video out this Friday. It will be non-ocean liner, non-Disney. So I think I have an idea. I think I'm going to try to learn about the ramparts that surrounded the city of New Orleans in the past. We'll see how that goes, because there's not much information. Well, I did the research 2 years ago, and there wasn't too much information back then, but maybe since then something has come up. But thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all next time. Bye-bye.